Christopher John shows me how, in glass painting, he works in layers, matting the glass with paint, then selectively removing paint to let more light through.
So what I'm doing here is putting a matte onto the glass, and the matte is a thin layer of paint. There's a little bit of oil on the surface, which is repelling it at the moment. So I'll just have to break that down. So with glass painting, what you do is work in layers. So this painting at the moment has had 3 layers, and I'm putting the 4th one on at the moment. And so you're covering your glass quite densely with paint, and then you're going to take away to reveal the light coming through.
So this combination of experience, skill, guesswork, risk?
Well, this is contemporary work. I'm using traditional techniques, but it's quite loose and painterly. If you were to be looking at Victorian glass painting, you'd see it would be highly modelled and very, what we would call tight and quite sort of formal. So once you've got that matte on, then you use a badger brush, actually made from badger hair, but from the tail of the badger. No animals were harmed in the making of this video. On goes that matte, and so the badgering process is distributing that in a very thin coating. And traditionally, I'll show you what they used to do traditionally before they had a hairdryer. They took the badger brush and would laboriously dry it like that. But I'm not going to. I'm going to use my hairdryer. So there are a number of brushes that you use to take away the paint. This is a hog's hair, so it's a stiff bristled brush. So now it's just a matter of taking out those highlights. So I'm in the pocket of darkness.
How many coats will there be eventually?
This is the last.
The last coat.
Yeah, it's essentially done. So what I'm doing is gradating the light over the face. So it's front lit, so I'm going to light the forehead, so I'll take all of that away. Now because this is quite a contemporary technique, I can use my finger to rub that back and be quite kind of playful and rough with it. So you'll see that gradually lightening. Now I've put gum arabic into the paint, and if you put very little gum arabic, the slightest touch and you'll break through to the light. But if you put too much in, it's like concrete. it won't come off. So I would have to admit, I've put a little bit too much in this mix. It's not too bad. So that's the front of the eyelid. The portrait is of a woman meditating. So the eyes closed there. So I've done a lot of life drawing. I went to art school and did a formal art course, and so over the years just sort of built up a knowledge of anatomy and how to model the face. It's a segment of a mural that I'm doing for a Catholic high school, and These have been laser cut, the piece of MDF at the back here, and then I've had these triangles cut up, and this is one of 5 and the shape interlocks. So you'll see that this negative here corresponds with that positive there and vice versa. So it's basically a square with these projections and recesses. So like jigsaw puzzle pieces, the 5 interlock. So that's the basis of it. Someone looked at this, the finished mural, the other section, and said, oh yes, so you've taken a photograph, put it through a computer, polarised the tones into a positive and negative, and you've screen printed it onto a bit of board. What's the big deal? I said, no, I have imitated a screen print. I've hand translated that tonal image into this, and then I've laboriously painted it. It was humanly enhanced, no computer involved. I would much prefer the integrity of doing this by hand than just, putting it through a computer. A friend calls it embodied human energy. I think something like that has a resonance that a computer will never be able to convey. It carries that mechanical quality with it.
So moving from art school, life drawing, how did glass come to feature in your work?
A curious story. After art school, you're not terribly qualified for anything. I majored in drawing. So that was at Paran College. And I worked as a postie for about 4 years. And within the first weeks of being a postie, there was another guy who'd been to RMIT and done painting. He was a postie. And he said, I think you should do stained glass. I thought, you've known me for 2 weeks and you have the gumption to say that? So I said, yeah, sure. And brushed him off. He was on my back. And in the end, I thought, well, there might be something in this. I did a basic lead lighting course. Thought, I love this. This is really good. And at that time, GlaasInc was the head of glass at Caulfield, which was Chisholm Institute at the time, now part of Monash Uni. And so I just bowled up there with a folio and said I wanted to do the course, and I'd already done my art and design course at Paran, so they threw me in with the 3rd years, and I did a postgrad year in glass painting. And so I could say I fell into it, but it was destiny.
Looks like,
Yeah, I love it. But yeah, I was just curious that someone would say, you should do... What do you know? But yeah, it's been fantastic.
Turns out it was an insight that worked.
Yeah. And the thing is, having majored in drawing at Paran, glass is heavily based on drawing skills. Well, traditional work is, because the cartoon has to be drawn, a full-scale cartoon has to be drawn before you start on a stained glass window.
Right.
And so you're working with drawn templates, and so you would place your glass over your cartoon and transfer that information up onto the glass, and so there's a series of steps and processes from your basic cartoon. So if you can't draw, you're going to be highly challenged in making a stained glass window.
Yes.
Traditional one. This I've actually based on a photograph, so it was a quick, short cut. But before I would do a proper drawing of a person sitting and posing for me before starting.
Tell me about the background.
This is part of a pair of windows, and I've based the theme of these two small sculptural pieces, based on the poem by St. Francis of Assisi. He'd written an ode to creation called Brother Sun, Sister Moon. And so this is one of the pair, Sister Moon, and then I'll do a second portrait, Brother Sun. So this is sort of a cosmos here in the background. I'm going to glue this over the top of the portrait, set it forward with a spacer, just so there's some dimensionality to it. So it's a small sculptural piece. And it's based on a drawing I did several years ago of sacred geometry and clouds, and there was a star map involved. So yeah, it's a meditating figure with the background of this cosmos. So an inward journey. Yeah. I was listening to an interview with a philosopher actually, and he was speaking of Mark Rothko. So this is a slight segue here. Mark Rothko was interviewed by Time magazine in America, and this rather sort of bully of an interviewer was saying, well, you know, what's your art about? You know, it's abstract expressionism, big black squares and red, can't make any sense out of it. In the end, he lost his temper with the interviewer, the reporter, and he said, look, there's a sadness in you and there's a sadness in me, and my works are the place where your sadness meets my sadness, and through that each of us feel a little less alone in the world, and that sadness is healed. I thought, wow, that's quotable. So if someone was to say to me, well, what's your artwork about? I would say, there's a sense of the sacred in you, and there's a sense of the sacred in me. And so my work is the place where those two senses of sacred meet, and both of us therefore can feel a little less alone and alienated in this world by that sense of the beauty of the sacred.
Beautiful,
So
beautiful.
A quotable quote from Mark Rothko, who had said that when he lost his temper. But so this is for an exhibition that Donna Kennedy is putting on at Melbourne Poly Institute for Melbourne Design Week.
I've looked at your website and seen the vast array of architectural glass work, which is very different in some ways. But tell me how you moved into that arena, which to me looks a little different, and yet it's just as beautiful.
Yes, well, architectural work was always my primary work. And so after doing mainly ecclesiastic work for about 10 years, I started doing large-scale domestic work, usually of a contemporary nature. And then another 10-year period I started diversifying and keeping the glasswork going, but doing icon painting and some murals and botanical and animal illustration and design.
I'm struck by the word modern creeps into a brain, but of some of your architectural work, the beautiful, the one that's was down at Donna's studio, the vertical
that
piece.
Column of,
and they're so different to the ecclesiastical drawings and storytelling.
Yes.
That's a big contrast. How does that work in your mind?
Well, it's really the relevance of glass to architecture. In the previous centuries, glass had more of an intimate relationship to the architecture, and the apertures and window sizes were smaller in the building, and so glass grew out of a mosaic process and was adapted to a building, small aperture. As architecture, went through a transformation, became more modern, and the steel structures and large sheets of glass window sizes became larger and larger and larger. And eventually it was too large for traditional glass, and the sleekness of contemporary architecture didn't suit stained glass any longer. So architecture kind of left stained glass behind. And so what's happened over probably the last 50 years is that more contemporary glass techniques have been invented. Silkscreen printing on glass, and also safety requirements in architecture. Now you need toughened glass and laminated glass, which once again left stained glass behind. So artists have been having to adapt their techniques where they can work on a big square meterage of glass, fire it in a few simple processes, and then send it to the toughness or send it to be laminated. So now it's meeting the requirements of a new architectural industry. Yeah. And so my workers had to keep up. If I wanted to work in contemporary architecture, my techniques had to adapt.
That's good.
And I love exploring. I always take on a new commission with a total fresh mindset.
So tell me, in a nutshell, why glass?
I love its inherent beauty, I guess. It has its own spirituality. It's illumined when you're working on canvas or board. You're only working with reflected light. The ambient light in the room that will light it. When you're working with glass, the light is coming through your subject, so it's self-illumined. I love that quality about it.
That's the name of this new exhibition, in fact, is Illuminance.
And also, it's dynamic because if it's in a building, the light is moving behind it throughout the day, so you get morning light, midday, afternoon light, and it'll change the nature of your image. You might have a distant tree, so you'll get dappled light across it, and it makes it a dynamic and living work of art.
I'm just fascinated by Donna's book that she's just produced and the spirituality in that.
Yes.
How long have you known Donna?
10, 15, I'd say 15 years. Yes. So this piece has been made for an exhibition, and what I've done is cut a slot, or a stonemason, he's cut a slot in this block of sandstone for me. So I'm going to mount the portrait like that, and then working with a halo of the cosmos, which will be glued at the back, like that. And so I get enough illumination into the face. I've sandblasted out my design. This is just temporarily tacked here. And I've offset it by about 1 centimetre, just so that there's a little bit more dimensionality to it, has a slightly more sculptural quality.